I work as a special ed teacher. My student's condition is far worse than autism. I used to work with a weird kid named Trevor. His parents and teacher were convinced he was on the autism spectrum, possibly an Asperger's kid. I've worked with autists, though, and I've been around savants. I could tell Trevor didn't have autism. I just never knew how bad it really was. I don't know what he had, but he acted different. Somehow he even felt different. It's hard to explain. Anyway, I worked in a special ed class with 10 kids, but most of our time was spent broken into even smaller groups. I had Trevor and 2 other kids, and I honestly think they gave me Trevor when I started because I was new, and they didn't want anything to do with him. He creeped me out at first, but eventually Trevor became my buddy. Little did I know this mistake would end up ruining my life forever. I had actual conversations with him even though the other teachers hadn't heard him say a single word before I was hired on. Trevor also used to have obedience problems, but once we developed a rapport, it seemed like I could get him to behave with the quickest of glances. He was a good little guy, even if he was really weird. A few months into working with him, Trevor decided he wanted to know all about me. Every day at recess, I would walk with him to a small oak tree he liked, and every day it was a new set of questions. Where was I born? How old was I? What did I want to be when I was a kid? He remembered each answer and built off of them the next day, asking in his innocent, inquisitive, almost feline way. And then the questions got downright bizarre. One day, Trevor asked if my arm still hurt from my car wreck. I've only ever been in one car wreck, a T-bone in high school. I dislocated my shoulder and totaled my car in that accident, and sometimes my shoulder still bothered me. I was pretty sure I hadn't mentioned it in class, but not certain, so I let it slide. The next day, again at his oak tree, Trevor asked me a question I knew for a fact I hadn't talked about in class. In fact, I had tried to not even think about the event for years. He said, "Why did Chris want to hurt you?" Chris was a boyfriend from college, a boyfriend, a stupid mistake, and a violent criminal. We met in a psych survey course. He was a year older than me, and he looked really good in a tank top. Anyway, we went on a few dates before Chris suggested we watch a movie at his dorm room. I agreed, but Chris wanted to do more than watch TV. We made out a little, but then I stopped it before it went any further. Chris got really angry, and I left. The next date went the same way. I figured it was typical horny guy hormones, and he would calm down eventually. When he didn't, I broke up with him. That was when the trouble started. He started following me. One night, I actually called campus police to request an escort back to my dorm. Chris picked the lock one night and left flowers and a long poem on my couch. When I didn't call him, he broke in again and confronted me. I ended up with a broken rib, a cracked cheekbone, and a missing tooth. My roommate came home when Chris was unbuckling his belt and I was trying to stay conscious on my kitchen floor. I can never thank her enough for her perfect timing. When Trevor asked me about Chris, it brought up a lot of things I didn't want to think about. Dark things, about what he did to me, about what I wanted to do to him. I don't know, I told Trevor. He held my hand and looked at me. Then he said, "Sometimes there are bad people. I'm happy you're okay," and ran off to play with another kid. Like I said, he was a weird kid, and he didn't have autism. I don't know why, but that tiny, almost insignificant talk with Trevor took a weight off my shoulder that I didn't even realize I was carrying. But how had he known? I pondered that for weeks until yesterday. Trevor was unusually quiet most of the day, until we were walking to his oak tree at recess when he started crying. I asked what made him so sad. For a while he couldn't talk, but once he got his sobbing under control, he said, "I won't see you again after today." I freaked out. This kid knew things about me that my boyfriend doesn't know, that my parents don't know. What did he know about the next day? Another car wreck? Was Chris out of prison and looking for me? I stayed home today with my doors locked and didn't do any driving at all. At 2 p.m. I got a call from my school. There had been an accident. An old man had fallen asleep while driving and plowed through the field at recess time. Trevor was pulling leaves from his oak tree at the time. The car pinned him between the oak's trunk and the car's hood. He was dead before the paramedics arrived. As I sat at home, shaken by Trevor's ominous words and the tragic news of his accident, my mind raced with confusion and fear. It was as though a dark cloud had settled over me, and I couldn't escape the feeling that something truly sinister lurked beneath Trevor's strange demeanor. Hours passed, and my anxiety only grew stronger. I decided to confide in my boyfriend about the unsettling events involving Trevor, hoping he could offer some comfort or explanation. But when I began recounting the story, I noticed an eerie change in his expression. His eyes widened, and a cold sweat broke out on his forehead. With a trembling voice, he whispered, "I know about Trevor." My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at him in disbelief. How could he possibly know about Trevor when I hadn't even mentioned him to anyone outside of work? Before I could demand an explanation, my boyfriend continued, "You see, I used to work in a psychiatric facility, and Trevor was one of our patients. But he wasn't just any patient. He was something else entirely. He was the subject of a covert government experiment. The facility had been conducting a long-term study on the development of unconventional human abilities, aiming to harness these powers for undisclosed purposes." My boyfriend went on to explain that Trevor's unique talent wasn't supernatural, but the result of years of conditioning and manipulation. Trevor had been trained to read people's behaviors and predict their actions with remarkable accuracy. He could uncover their deepest secrets by observing subtle cues, a skill that had been honed to perfection through a series of unethical experiments. I was left in disbelief. I don't know who I can trust anymore.